Good evening, lovely people. Welcome to PM Personality Profile. My guest tonight, she's an academic and an author, former director of the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana, former director of the Social Development Policy Division of the UN Economic Commission for Africa. She's a fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences and a senior fellow of the Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana. Professor Takyiwaa Manuh, my guest tonight. I'm very excited to sit with you this evening. How have you been and what have you been up to?
Busy. Busy. I'm supposed to be doubly retired. I am old by any definition.
You don't look
and
it
yet
anyway.
I find myself really busy.
Working for God and country.
Yeah, and everybody else. Yeah, sometimes I think I need to work for myself, but so far, well, trying to pace myself, yes.
Definitely, and we thank God that you're still strong and fit to do all that you're doing for Mother Ghana. Let's start with your recognition and for your hard work and immense contribution to the various roles that you've played. In 2015, you were awarded an honorary Doctor of Laws degree by the Success University. In 2008, Order of Volta Award. 2007, Ghana's Meritorious Service Awards, and in 2004, co-winner of the National Business Council Best Paper in Women's Entrepreneurship Award. How do all of these make you feel?
Humble, pleased that I have made a mark in various areas and been recognized for it. And thankful for the different people, colleagues, teachers, family, friends who have supported me over the years to achieve what I have managed to. You know, sometimes I doubt it is very easy to look back on your life and think, oh, I planned this and after this I'll do this. Well, of course, there must be some level of planning, some level of intentionality, but there is also some luck and the support of colleagues, not just academic colleagues, but you know, even different household members, the people who help you to organize your life, get you there, your children, all kinds of people support you over the years, and I think it's important to acknowledge that support.
Congratulations for achieving that height. When I grow up, I want to be like you.
I'm waiting for you.
Let's delve into your research areas. I know that you are so passionate about gender and women in Ghana. Your work includes women's rights and issues of empowerment in Ghana, contemporary African migrations, and higher education in Africa. What did the research in these areas uncover?
Thank you. So let me start. You know, I trained as a lawyer. I went to, in those days, you went straight to the Faculty of Law. So I graduated with a law degree. I did my bar. I did a master's in law. And then I chose to work at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. That is primarily a research institute, even though we do some teaching. So when I started, and even during my studies, or basically growing up, I was very conscious of the injustices that women faced in different phases of our society. You saw it at the level of households, you saw it at workplaces, etc. So it was not a surprise maybe that my research eventually gravitated towards that, so that in whatever substantive area that I researched, I was also very interested in the conditions and situation of women and girls. And you're asking me what did I find? That's like a lot of findings that I need to summarize. But as I said, from that starting point, so for instance, in the 1980s, when we had structural adjustment programs and policies in Ghana, I was interested in looking at the effect of structural adjustment on women in Ghana. Women traders, women as producers, women as household members, you know. And I found a lot of things which was common with what much of the research uncovered, that many of these programs had never been designed or formulated with women in mind. So in Ghana we had a famous program, I don't know if you were born yet, called PAMSCAD, the Program of Adjustment to Mitigate, Program of Actions to Mitigate the Social Cost of Adjustment. So it's almost like after the program was implemented, it was found to have a disproportionate impact, negative impact on what was called vulnerable groups, you know. So a number of measures were put in, but this was some of what our research was bringing out. Before structural adjustment, we had a regime of price controls, devaluations, etc. And now we had liberalization, trade liberalization, which meant in theory that, you know, goods became abundant because they could be imported. But they also directly competed with a lot of things that women were doing, and it also needed a lot of capital. And the previous regimes had collapsed the businesses of several people. So even when things were, programs or policies were designed to help people, you found that it did not necessarily have the desired impact. Similarly, the work on women's rights and, you know, gender equality generally. I mean, this is 2023. We're trying to pass an affirmative action law in Parliament, which has stalled for over 20 years. In 1992, when the Constitution was formulated, there was a clause in the Constitution saying soon after coming into force of this Constitution, which meant 1993, a law will be passed to regulate the property rights of spouses. We have had this Constitution now for what, 30 years. There is no such spousal property bill. And you know what it means, that, you know, the uncertainties, the unfairness, the injustices, etc. So as a researcher, rooted in my society, interested in issues of women and rights, you cannot fail to notice some of these things. And consequently, the effects and impacts that it has on women in their economic advancement, in their representation and participation in national life. Ghana still has some of the lowest representation of women in political life, which is ironic given that in 1959 Ghana had passed the Representation of the People Women Members Act. That was the first affirmative action policy. So here we are, we gained independence in 1957. In 1959, we passed this Representation of the People Women's Members Act. And now, 60-some years later, we're still struggling, you know, and next year we're going to have elections. We will see whether it turns out any differently. So asking, and you know, in 1959, when that bill was introduced, there was opposition in Parliament, and some of the opposition members were saying, oh, they don't just want some lipstick and pancaked faces, and the women got up. Can you imagine? Well, you'll be surprised that perhaps that thinking has not changed. And the women members said, ask them to withdraw the statement, and they did, you know, because what it does, what different groups in public life do, is that they enrich, you know, they make the space inclusive Today we have many female journalists and media persons.
Yeah.
It was not always so.
Yeah.
And you have your own perspectives and needs that comes up.
Sure.
So when we ask for women's representation, it's not an act of charity. It's not just so we can have some beautiful faces. What it does is that it enriches the debate. Not just women, younger people. We have a political life. So ironically, we have, not just in Ghana, most of Africa, West Africa, the median age of our population is like 19, and the median age of our politicians is about 60.
Yeah.
So there is this disconnect, you know.
Yeah.
You have young populations, and yet it is hard to find members of parliament who are under 30 years old. Cabinet ministers who are less than 40 is unheard of. And it's not going to get easier as our politics get more and more monetized. So it is a real barrier. So I think that a lot of the time the issues, the topics that I have researched reflect very much my experiences. So for instance, I went to live in the United States in the early 90s. And technically I was a migrant. And I got interested in issues of migration. In fact, my PhD dissertation was on Ghanaian migrants who lived in Canada. And not only that, it became a major area of research for me, culminating in me helping to establish the Center for Migration Studies at the University of Ghana. But even in my migration work, I was also interested in gender issues. So one of the papers that I wrote based on my research in Ghana was called This Place Is Not Ghana. And this was about gender relations among migrants in Canada, where sometimes, you know, you have a lot of conflict, etc. And then the man like raises his hand and the woman says, hey, this is not Ghana. If you touch me, I will charcoal on you, you know, and a whole lot of these issues, but they reflected different kinds of tensions, you know. So and then also because I was in the higher education space, quite a bit of my research has been on higher education. So I have bodies of work in different areas, whether it's on women's rights and empowerment, whether it's on migration, whether it's on higher education, etc.
I've actually seen a number of your research papers, including an issue of Feminist Africa on sexual cultures, Asante Heme's court and its jurisdiction over women in Asante, at home in the world, contemporary migration and development in Ghana and West Africa, and all the others you've talked about. What were some of the recommendations you proffered in these research papers?
Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, most of them originally are written for academic purposes, but they do have some policy implications. So for instance, out of my PhD work, I published a lot of papers. I've already mentioned this issue of gender relations among them in the migrant community. There's another chapter, a paper that I presented at a conference in the UK, which ended up as a book chapter called Efie, or the Meanings of Home among Migrants. So you find that when you are in the migrant community, they keep talking about home. But when you really analyze it, the men and the women talk about home in different ways. So for men, when you talk about Efie, like they are in Canada, in Toronto, they're having to take out the rubbish, and it's like, if I was home, me, a man, you know. So a lot of the time, and it's not just among Ghanaian migrants. When you look at the literature, it happens among several of the migrant communities, people from Latin America, etc. So within the migrant space, you have to survive. So you do everything to survive. There is a certain forced equality, and a lot of men tend to resent it. So they want to come back home, and then they are big men, Boga, this one, etc. They come, they make like whatever money or properties they earned, they alone did it, and their families think that they did everything. So they want to come back home and settle and be big men. On the other hand, you find that the women are very cautious because there's a fear. Even if I am Mrs., if I come home, my husband can marry, whether formal or informally, another woman. The Ghanaian state does not recognize the rights of women in the same kind of way. Property rights are uncertain. Last year, for instance, the Supreme Court gave a set of very interesting decisions on the property rights of migrant women that I've written about. So when, so for the men, Efie is a zone of comfort and security, and the women feel very distant that their rights may not quite be recognized,
It's being recognized
yes, but at the
elsewhere.
same time, they also are conscious. They are growing older. They don't want to grow old in Canada or somewhere. Have to take the bus, even when they can maybe end up in an old person's home. So you can clearly see those kinds of implications. And it goes back to this issue of the spousal rights bill. If all of these bills have been passed and it is clear what is yours and what is mine, and whether we have put a ring on or not, and we have lived together and announced to the whole world that we are a couple, then there are some rights that accrue. Do you see? So you can infer whether I make it or not, the different policy recommendations. I have a paper on children and like intergenerational relations. So a lot of women especially, they want their mothers to go and stay with them when they have children abroad. And it's like, hey, I have expended money and brought you here. But after a few months, the mothers are bored. They want to come home. The children don't speak Ghanaian language. The people are always going to work, so tensions develop between loneliness. So you have the tensions developing between mothers and their daughters, mothers and their in-laws, mothers and the grandchildren. All of these, so there is the clear issue of language. How do you have a child who does not speak your mother tongue, who cannot communicate with important relations, etc.? How do you bring lower some of these tensions in marital relations, most of which is around money and property? How do you create conducive economic systems that lessen migration is a right? People should, and the point is that, as I keep stressing, if you look at the world population, only 3% of the world population migrates. And yet in policy discourses, it is presented as if everybody has queued up, waiting to go. And we know also that a few years somewhere can change people's fortunes. So there should be easier migration regimes. Every day you go around when you go to town, you see all these people queued up, waiting for visas. They take their money, they don't get the visas, they are bound. People spend years when they should be productive, dreaming of going abroad, etc. People can dream. If there were easier migration regimes, people can go for a few years and come back. But the way the regimes are made, people who never intended to stay abroad end up staying on and on, because if you come back, they'll say you overstayed your visa, you will not get another visa. So your 3 years becomes 15 years, and before you know it, you have spent 40 years and you have nothing, and you can't come back home. You may still not have the papers. So there's a lot of hypocrisy. Migrants are needed. Many populations in the West are growing older and older as Africa is getting younger, and more. There are more of us, and we are also younger. So how are these countries going to solve their population problems? You can't wish it, because it's not just asking women to have children. If you have work regimes that are really unforgiving, that do not support childcare, etc., the sharing of responsibilities at home, people will make what the economists will call rational choices and not have the children, which means that you are going to need to import labor. There are some things, now there's they are robots and artificial intelligence, but they are not human beings, you know. So there are things that will happen. So we need much more open systems, which actually give people flexibility. In my own work, I talk about transnationalism. It's like you've got 1 foot here and 1 foot here. So so now when you are on a flight from somewhere to Ghana, the planes are always full, right? A lot of people are bringing their children home on holidays, going back. It's good for them. The children connect, the migrants themselves connect. They are able to make investments in their home regions, etc., and then go back. You know, these are good for economies. The people who are keeping people out, they were, when you read the history books, all the adventurers and all of those things, that was migration. And they took more. They were taking gold and people and everything. Right now, people only want the right to work. It's not charity. And they work hard. We know that people work harder when they travel sometimes than they do at home. Okay, so why is this not recognized? Why is this not valued? You know, you can't just tell people stay here and all of that, places which are in conflict, you know. But even after saying all of that, more people are moving around Africa than they are moving outside. You know, so that is why it is good that we are also opening up our visa systems. This recent, I mean, getting a South African visa was one of the most horrible things that you could do. Very, very difficult. And yet, migrants who go anywhere, they spend a lot of money. They spend money. You don't just, if you have nothing in your pocket, you will not take your bag and say you are traveling, especially for short-term visitors. And it doesn't make sense. Why would a Ghanaian leave Ghana and say that they are going to live in Ethiopia? And yet you want to visit. Ethiopia too does visa on arrival. Basically, when I want to go to any of the ECOWAS countries, it doesn't even occur to me. I just go. I arrive in Kenya, I get my visa. This is what it should be. You know, but we have these very restrictive, colonial-inspired borders and border controls trying to keep people out. I think a few months this year, when they had, a few months ago, when they had the Afri-Exim Bank Summit here in Accra, I saw there's a TV station, I think it's Arise or one of these African stations. So I saw a panel, and Dangote was on the panel. So he was saying, look at me. I arrive in, he didn't name the country. I don't know whether he mentioned South Africa or something. I arrive in this African country, and they are asking me, where's my visa? And he says, a Nigerian who has a British passport arrives in that country, and then they are allowed to go in. And he says, but me and this other person, who has the means to employ people? This is Dangote.
Even spend in your
so
country.
so if you do that, he says, I will not come and invest my money in your country. So we are actually having certain policies that are even a disincentive to investment, to a free flow of talent. You know, we talk a lot about unemployment, but sometimes it's also because the mobility of even talented labor around Africa and the recognition. If you go and you show your GIG degree, will it be recognized? Will you be put at the level? So there is that whole portability. You need portability, you need recognition. You should be, if you have health insurance, we need systems where your health insurance can be used across the continent. All of these foster, you know, we talk about Europe and the European Union and things. Those are some of the things that they fashioned for themselves. We seem to be very good, even as we have the Africa Continental Free Trade. Every day you are reading about barriers, even for these big trucks that are moving goods, etc. You know, so usually when you travel by air, it's easier, but those who are traveling on the land borders, it's extremely difficult and counterproductive, actually.
I'm happy that you spoke about the female or women representation in decision-making platforms. In Parliament currently, we have 40 women, 20 for both sides, and that makes it about a 14.5% representation in Parliament. Certainly, 40 out of 275 is not encouraging. Do you know why we've not made a lot of progress?
Well, West Africa is peculiar. I'm actually doing a lecture next week on women's political representation. And if you look at the regions in West Africa, I think apart from Central Africa and maybe the North African region, we really are at bottom, you know. Senegal has a gender parity law, which is interesting. Do you see? Yeah. So it's not about religion. It's not. It's about state policy. It's about intention. So in West Africa, apart from Senegal, Cape Verde, and remarkably Togo is making a lot of progress. The same way, we tend to look down on people or countries. We think, oh, this is a small country. But when you look at the statistics, you find that it's different. But what generally, most of those other countries that have achieved progress, they've done it through quota systems, they've done it through proportional representation. And you know that here the political parties have fiercely resisted any talk of, you know, reserving seats for women, etc. But we're going to. In any case, when the affirmative action law is passed, and that is one of the reasons why it has stalled. It hasn't just stalled, you know. It does make demands of, you know. So in Kenya, for instance, you cannot nominate people to any position, like say the courts, without a certain proportion being of either sex. So you cannot have an all-women slate, you cannot have an all-men slate, etc. It recognizes that you need both for, you know, work to happen. So when the affirmative action bill is passed, it will oblige political parties, you know, different sectors of society to do more about this really lopsided. You're talking about parliament. What about district assemblies? We have these are the basic units of governance. And over time, the proportions have gone down. Even the appointed members were not meeting our quotas. So we do need to do more. I think in Ghana, we like resting on our laurels. We like thinking that, oh, when we did this, there was last week there was some index of English speaking, good English speakers in Africa, and Ghana was behind Nigeria, and people said, "What?" Wow. Yes, so Ghana was behind. So I think South Africa topped the list, followed by Kenya, Nigeria. I think Ghana was 4th or 5th, and people were surprised. Do you see?
Yeah.
So these things don't just happen. And we are not surprised when you hear about tests in school. You find that there are so many, a large proportion of children who are in class 4 or something who cannot read, who cannot understand anything that they read. So we need to do something about this. It's been going down. I have a favorite story of Honorable Barredo when he was Minister for Education. So apparently there's a story that he has arrived in Kumasi, he's in traffic, and one of these young boys who sell things in traffic get to him and they say, "Honorable," you know, he's holding this, you know, those erasers, those things that you write on and you pull it and it erases. And so Barredo is supposed to have asked the young man, say 8 cedis. So he says, "Write 8, and then I'll buy it."
And he couldn't
write. Honorable, 8 bad, you know. So if it was just the figure, he could have. But to write 8
in words,
yes, EIGHT.
He cannot.
Well, you know, the English language is also rather idiosyncratic. I mean, how does EIGHT
become 8?
But anyway, the young man scratches and he said, "Master, it's bad." So in the end, he didn't buy it. But we're saying this is somebody who has been to school and they cannot spell 8.
Yeah. It's quite sad, but the men would, or generally the explanation you would get from most people will be that a lot of women don't put themselves up for the job. Is that the case?
That's a cop-out, first of all, because it's not true that women are not interested. We've done work I'm a member of Net Rights, the Network for Women's Rights in Ghana. We've done work on women's representation at different levels, and we have had lots of fora with women who stood or wanted to stand. There's a lot of interest, and interestingly, many of these women receive support even from the men folk. So I think that there are real structural barriers, that we have to face, about women in politics. We have a society that is very unforgiving, that characterizes women in public life as loose, uncontrolled, etc. A lot of insults. There are also financial barriers. There can also be unsupportive spouses and family members, So yes, and then some women feel that, but increasingly, when you do the research, it's not true that women are not interested, So even if some women were not interested, what about the women who are interested? Why are they not getting in? There are more women who stand than get elected. So it's not true that women are passive. It used to be said that women were not interested in going to school. Is that true? No. So even if you look at parity, gender parity in primary schools and stuff, you find that there is almost equality there. So let them try it and see whether we are interested or not. It's not true.
And so, I mean, just next year we are getting into elections. It's one of the tough elections we're going to be seeing. What do you want to see in terms of women taking up some of these decision roles?
Well, you see, it doesn't just drop. I mean, most of the parties, I think the NDC has largely finished its primaries. So if you don't get in at the primaries, where are you going to get in? The NPP is going to do its primaries soon. I do not have any hopes that the situation will change.
The NPP is that, okay, you mean for orphan constituencies?
Yes. So all of that. So I do not have many hopes that these things will just change by themselves. They will not change by themselves.
Maybe we are not angry enough.
Maybe. So when we have this affirmative action, when we have to put in some very determined policies or strategies for these things to happen. What are the incentives for political parties? What are the incentives for districts? All of those kinds of things. So it will not just happen. So every election is framed as decisive, different, etc. Yes, this is important. We would, by next year, we would have been finishing the first quarter of the 21st century. So we have to ask ourselves, what has changed in this first quarter of the 21st century? So for me, those are the important issues, that we are going along the same path that we have trodden. And at this rate, in our lifetime, certainly not in my lifetime, very little is going to change. So we need more determined effort. We can't just hope that things will somehow change. All the countries where things have happened, they have taken decisive action and implemented. It's not just about policies. In Ghana, we've got policies on everything, but when it comes to implementation, we are really very weak. Implementation is important. You need resources to implement. Before not just that you have to plan for that. So you need resources, human, financial. You have to plan. You need leadership. You need ownership. You need champions. Do you see? And then you also need an assessment of the political economy. Who will benefit? Who will lose? What are the resistances that they will put up? How do we counter all of those things?
Professor Takyiwaa Manuh, she is an emerita professor at the University of Ghana. She's one of the tough women in the academia. She's an author. And when I return from this break, we'll be getting into her skin proper. You've been seeing her on television speak about national issues. If you were in Legon, you may have encountered her because she has been your lecturer. But who really is Professor Takyiwaa Manuh? She'll be telling us more about growing up. What did she want to become? A researcher? I would also be gauging her mood on her career. She's been so many things. She was the former director of the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana, director of the Social Development Policy Division of the UN Economic Commission for Africa, fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, senior fellow at CDD Ghana. She's been so many things. She'll be sharing her journey to the top. How has it been? I know it hasn't been a straight path. She'll be sharing all of those with us. She'll also be sharing with us her lifestyle and family values. Stay with me. I'm coming right back. Welcome back to PM Personality Profile. My guest is Professor Takyiwaa Manuh. She is an academic and author, a senior fellow at CDD Ghana. I know you are from the Ashanti region, but where to be precise?
Oh, so I was born in Kumasi. My parents come from a town not far from Kumasi called Ankasi.
Mm. And both parents are from the Ashanti region?
They were, yeah, they're both deceased, of course.
From Ankasi?
Yes.
Okay, so you were born there?
I was born in Kumasi.
Is that where you grew up?
Yes, I grew up in Kumasi, and then I went to secondary school in Cape Coast at, you must know where.
Okay, of course. I know.
Wesley Girls High School.
I know, right? But you went to class 1 actually 3 times.
Yes. So
what really happened?
Okay, so I was very close to my paternal grandmother.
Okay.
Yes. So I lived with her at some point. So I started class 1 in Ankasi, whilst the rest of the family was in Kumasi.
Okay.
Then my father took me back to Kumasi. Then I went to Amokom Methodist, and then I went to Edum Primary School Presbyterian. You know, I think in 1986, I was in the US and I had gone to this Christmas party, and some guy said, we were in class 1 together at Edum Presbyterian. I was so shocked. I didn't know how he managed to remember me, you know. So, yes, after doing these 3 class 1s, then I went to Penworth Preparatory School, then I went to the University Primary School in Kumasi, and then I went to Wesley Girls.
How was growing up like in
Kumasi? A lot of fun. 2 weeks ago, one of my classmates wrote an autobiography, and it was launched, and I chaired it. And the way she started it, it really took me to the Kumasi of the 1950s, you know. So, my mother sold things in the market, and I enjoyed really selling things. And my father would get very angry, and I was so happy. I would go. My mother would. Where we lived was near a lorry park, so my mother would, you know, put water, ice water. I'll go and sell it, and my father would come home and he would be furious, you know, and I'd be very happy. And my mother said I was very lucky because as soon as I take the things, I sell it all, and I come back for some, you know. So I was very happy doing those things, helping my mother, and yeah, my father didn't like it at all. You know.
Your father, was he a teacher or something?
No, he was not a teacher. He was a private businessman. He didn't like it, but I enjoyed it. It gave me a chance to see people, to participate. So we grew up in a very lively neighborhood, and it has influenced me. We grew up in a neighborhood which was on the edge. It was near a Zongo, it was near a Fanti New Town, it was near an Nzima. So I reflect all of those things in my eating choices, you know, because I grew up eating tozafi, I grew up eating fonfon, I grew up eating tatale, yokegal, gari abolo, all of those things. So those are still things that I really like from my childhood, and it was that kind of influence that helped me.
What were some of the childhood expeditions that you still even remember as?
Oh, when I was growing, I always stood up for my mother. So my father used to call me Abna lawyer.
Okay.
If they had a dispute, I would take her side.
So and even at that age, your father knew you were going to be a lawyer.
Well, he knew. I didn't know. I thought I was going to be a doctor. He thought that because of my sense of fairness and you know, it would be like Abna lawyer, and I could stand up to him. Like if they had a dispute, I could tell him that, you know. This was, you know, and a lot of the time, his anger would be like he was not going to eat the food. And we would be very happy because, you know, in a traditional household, your father's food is the choicest. So
with big meats and stuff.
So one day, after he had decided he wasn't going to eat the food, and then I think I persuaded him to eat, the food was gone. My mother said, Mongo Vambra, and then it had been shared, and we really enjoyed it because, you know, I mean, I used to be angry growing up. I would watch my mother kill 2 chickens, and at the end of it, she says there's not enough soup. I said, and then I told her, me, I don't eat chicken neck. I also eat
chicken thigh.
Yeah, and this is real chicken, not frozen chicken. I also eat the thigh and this, and then she go, when you grow up, you can sit at table with your husband, and when he picks one, I said, exactly. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to give the 2/3 of the soup to one person, and then the rest of us have to share one thing. So I had a fair sense, you know, and I think going to Wesley Girls strengthened it because we were trained to be very independent people. High standards of academic excellence, but also a lot of emphasis on service, and service. In Wesley Girls, as you got to the top forms, we spent time in the villages around Wesley Girls. There was also a leprosarium and a psychiatric hospital not far from Wesley Girls, Ankerful. And we used to go there and do volunteer work with the women in the psychiatric hospital, helping to tidy their rooms, helping them with their personal hygiene, even in the leprosarium, you know. So we were raised on an ethos of service that you're not getting your education just for yourself. It is to help other people in society. And then also we were encouraged to read very widely, and I read very widely. I really enjoyed reading. So the typical punishment that you got in Wesley Girls if you did not obey the rules was that on Saturday afternoon you went to what was called detention, which meant during visiting time you were in a classroom and you had to copy the dictionary. And for me, it wasn't a punishment because I used it to learn a lot of words. So
when you go to class, you'll be splashing them with
by
the vocabulary.
The time passes, I'm not even aware of it, you know. So, but I found Wesley Girls really formative. We had very good teachers from around the world. They exposed us to a lot of things. I did French up to A levels.
Oh, wow.
And so even in our oral French classes, some of which were done by lecturers from the University of Cape Coast, just to encourage us to speak, we were introduced to all kinds of topics and issues, you know. This was also the time of the Vietnam War. So again, we had a firm sense of social justice and a lot of issues. The headmistress and some of the teachers, they were Quakers, and the Quaker tradition is very much rooted in social justice and reform. So I imbibed a lot of that. So by the time I arrived at university, I was fully formed, you know, because Wesley Girls had really
the discipline,
but also the independence of thought, you know, and also the strength to stand up for what you believe in, whether it is popular or not.
What kind of a student were you?
What kind of student was I? I was a good student, but for instance, so I made a decision. So up to O level, I did additional science, additional math. Like I said, I thought I was going to be a doctor.
Okay.
And then by that time, the results that were coming out, there were some people who were so sure they would do well and they didn't do very well. So when we got to sixth form, I could have chosen to do science or arts, and I decided, if I do science, I'll have to spend all my afternoons in the science lab. That's not the life I wanted. I wanted to be able to read literature, go for walks and things. And so I knew that one, I could do it very easily. Yeah. So I did French, I did economics, and I did English at A levels, you know. And then when I got to university, I wasn't sure. I had applied to both the law faculty and the School of Administration, and I got selected for both. Okay. So when I went to, I think the interview at the School of Administration was very short. I was asked which of the two I would choose, and I said law. Okay. So, but I had already gone and done the law school interview, you know. Unfortunately, when I went to the law faculty, I was a bit disappointed because I had some ideas about what it was going to be about. And I was soon educated that it was about rules and regulations, which I found boring. But anyway, knowing the law, etc., you know. Yeah. So if I still stuck, I actually left. Okay. I decided that this is not what I wanted. Okay. So I actually went home. And my father told me not to be silly.
and go back.
And then some people I didn't know were very angry, like, who is this little girl? Who does she think she is? She should be very lucky that she's been accepted to the law faculty. Anyway, I didn't buy any of it. So I even tried to change my course. I went to a few departments, but eventually I went back. I did political science also. It was an elective with the law. Okay. I did that, and then, when I finished, then I did my bar, and then I went to Tanzania to do my master's.
To do your master's. Let's still go back to Wesley Girls. As a little girl who used to stand up to your father and tell him, this is not right, this is wrong. I'm sure at Wesley Girls you didn't tolerate nonsense. If any senior wanted to bully you, you won't take it.
No, actually I was saved. I was physically very small. Okay. So the seniors, I was spared some of the bullying, you know, because I was very small.
They were pitying you?
Yeah, in fact there was a senior, I can't remember her name now, who gave me a name. She called me Odoyewu, and that in the morning I should come and say things I didn't even understand. So that one, but I was rebellious. Okay. Yes, so the seniors spared me, but I didn't obey school rules just because they were school rules. I had to understand why I had to.
So you asked questions?
Oh yes, I asked questions, and sometimes I didn't do it because I was not satisfied, you know.
Then we had a very
patient. Oh, our headmistress was very patient. Miss Garnett, she was an angel. She was very, very patient.
Lucky you.
Yeah, no, she was very patient. People would tell her a lot of lies, and then she would just. So she was very patient and tolerant. I think they realized that this was also a time when we were developing personalities, you know. So I felt encouraged. I felt very encouraged to explore, you know, my ideas, to think independently. I think secondary school is crucial. I think you get to university, you're on your own. You're an adult.
If you don't go
to classes, it's your problem. In secondary school, or at least at the time I was in secondary school,
things were
very regulated, and you were guided, you know, and it was formative. So if you don't learn to write in secondary school, you're not going to learn in university. They put up some courses, etc. But the basic school and the secondary level, that is why, for instance, I think that it is important that everybody gets a secondary education. That in our era now, basic education is not just primary school. It is also secondary school. Whether it should be free boarding is another matter. I don't believe in that. There's nowhere in the world where you get free boarding school, especially when it means that some children don't even get to go to primary school. But as for secondary school, and I think for myself, I think the one of the disappointments is how technology has not been sufficiently leveraged to allow the senior secondary school to. I don't think it's
Did you ever
correct.
get into trouble in school?
Of course. Didn't you? Who doesn't? I mean, it's only parents who claim that they never got into trouble in school. I did. Sometimes the headmistress or somebody would tell me, oh, it's speech day, they were going to give me a prize, but because I did this, so fine, don't give me. It's okay. It doesn't affect my academic performance. Plenty. Some of the teachers had their own names for me. They said I could bag them and all of that, But yeah.
What was your biggest obstacle in secondary school?
The food wasn't very good, but I knew it was in school and it would end, and then I could go home and eat good food.
So you used to skip dining hall?
And eat what? I mean, Wesley girls, you couldn't go to the box room every day. Your box room was not in your dormitory.
Okay, so whether you like.
No. Actually, one of my fantasies when I was going there was that, oh, this is on the beach, we'll have nice fish. And I remember we always had broken fish. I mean, like, it was small fish, So the food is not the most memorable part of my time in Wesley Girls. No.
Okay.
The memorable part was when you got to sixth form and you had an exeat on Saturday, and you could go to Kotokraba and come back with tatale and beans. Yes, that was memorable. But everyday food in Wesley Girls. I remember, I think Thursday afternoon, we had some very thin palm nut soup with boiled plantain, boiled ripe plantain. I hated it. I hated it. The soup didn't taste very good. When you think of a benkwai, you think of something thick and nice. This one was
like
some slow,
like water.
Yeah, like light soup in a benkwai with boiled plantain.
Light soup with red oil.
I hope none of the matrons is listening to this. It's not. I don't know what resources they were given, but that's what it tasted to me, like to me.
So from Wesley Girls to University of Ghana,
yes,
certainly it wasn't the same.
No, it wasn't the same. But so I got to university in October 1971. I had a room to myself. I was in Saba Hall, so I'd gone from an all-girls school to a mixed hall.
Yeah.
I was and the things were nice. They were different. But the following year, there was a coup d'etat.
Yeah.
And and I was very involved in student politics.
I know, right?
Yeah. And as things deteriorated. In fact, originally, I was not supportive of the coup d'etat, but like some of the things about making Ghana prosperous. I remember we went to a suchari to go and cut sugar cane, all of those kinds of things, etc. But very soon we were protesting against the military and its brutalities, and the university was closed several times, and I participated actively. I remember once we went to a demonstration. We got to near the Ghana Standards Authority, and the soldiers met us, and it looked like they had been there all night.
Waiting for you?
Yes. And they had their bayonets, and we were dancing right in front of the bayonet. And at some point they said they were tired. We should have said, but we didn't send you here. Go, if you are tired, go home and sleep, etc. We were still standing there when they announced that the university had been closed. Oops. So we went through all these closures. But, even when the university was closed, the universities were closed. We found time to do things. We were always very much in contact with students at the University of Cape Coast and Kumasi, etc. One day I was actually traveling. I was in a state transport bus, and I had some documents that I was taking to students at the University of Cape Coast, and we were stopped. The soldiers came and searched, and I was terrified because if they found these materials,
You'll be in trouble.
Yeah, but actually this reminds me of an incident when I was in Wesley Girls.
Okay.
So when I was in Wesley Girls, I went to Wesley Girls in 64. So there was the 66 coup. And the coup was in February. And then I was on vacation. We were on vacation in July. So I was with my mother. We were going to see her jeweler in a Edum. And we got to a place and saw a tent, one of these military tents, a shop, outside the shop. So I was surprised and I looked up. And the soldier said, "Hey, come here." So, you know, when you're in secondary school, you're very confident. So you just don't go there. You stand like this. And they said, "Why did I look up?" And I said, "Why couldn't I look up? Why was it written that I couldn't look up?"
You asked that?
Yes. You know, when you're a child, you also don't understand what fear was. I would have been about, 14?
At that time.
And so they said they had arrested me. And my mother was standing there begging and crying and this.
You really didn't even care about it.
No, and they said I should apologize. And I said, for what?
For what?
So I told my mother to just leave me and go. And I think my father had traveled. So my mother was thinking that they knew an RSM at the army barracks and she was going to. So eventually, and then a crowd gathered, etc. And then the soldier man said, "Next time." And I said, "Next time I will look." You know. Eventually, they let me go. So at the time, I didn't understand that military regimes are so repressive and authoritarian. But by the time I got to university, I understood, because sometimes I remember we had one demonstration in Lagos. The police beat me. I was a fifth year law student. They beat me.
For what?
Oh, for protesting. So I remember there's somebody I would not mention, some important fellow. So he was a student leader, and the police had, you know, Legon, the police station is just across the road.
Yes.
So they had dragged some students to the police station, and the students were behind the gate, and the police had formed a cordon at the entrance to the university, and they wanted to go to the police station to go and rescue that student. So eventually, like, there was a lot of pressure on the student leader that he should go and negotiate the release. And then the student leader said I should go with him.
With him.
And I could see that if I didn't go, he wouldn't go. So I
followed.
I was. And as soon as we crossed, I used to wear glasses.
Yeah.
The policeman, one of the policemen, yanked off my glasses and used his boot to step on it, and they started raining, beating my head with a baton. No, I really remember. And took us to the police station. So we became the symbol of the students, you know, etc. So I remember my sister in Kumasi said the next day she saw in the newspaper, 5th year law student, and she said, I knew it was you. I knew it was you, but
you were troublesome.
I knew it was me. What trouble had I caused? They had troubled me, but I remember it was really severe. I had to put ice and on my head. Actually, it just reminds me, you know. So I remember lawyer Kutampa, who has just died. We were both in Sabaho. He was doing his master's. So I remember he came with a lot of ice to put on my head, etc. So actually, when I was a student, twice the SRC bought glasses for me, because when we went to Asuchare to harvest sugarcane, we had put so much sugarcane in a tractor, and I was on top of it, and the tractor rolled over. Oops. And then my glasses were broken. And then this time too, when the police broke my glasses, the SRC bought me a new pair of glasses. You know. So yes, I had a fun time in university, but those were heady times. This was when Ghana played a very active role in African affairs, and we met a lot of the then leaders of Africa. And we, as students, we really yoked our cloth to national needs, national aspirations, and for many of us, that was the thing to do. Yes.
And of course, after University of Ghana, you went to do your master's and came back to the University of Ghana. So, Director of Institute of African Studies, Director at the UN Division for Economic Commission.
Social Development Policy Division of the Economic Commission for Africa.
Africa. I mean, so many things. Let's talk about your career.
Yes.
How has the journey been?
Well, it's been interesting. As I said, I was trained as a lawyer. I was called to the bar. I did do some legal practice, actually. In fact, I keep telling myself, that I would have been a very rich woman because I worked in this law firm. And one day the senior came and said, and I'm not going to name any names, so he had made me and another very important woman in Ghana today. He had made us partners. And I actually let him take my name off. Can you believe it?
So goodness. Oh, you didn't understand what that was?
I was not interested
why?
in money. But so anyway, I used to do practice. I used to practice as a lawyer. I used to go to the courts. And then when I went to live in the US and I came back, that's when I stopped any practice, any legal practice. But I think that my career has been very much fueled by my beliefs, my activities, my organization. So I've always been very active in the women's movement. I have participated in struggles, whether to pass domestic violence legislation, etc. And all of this has been reflected in my teaching and research, and my passion for social justice and for the defense of human rights is well known. And I've been doing it for so long, I'm not going to stop in my old age. And I really believe in defending the rights of people, of minorities, of women, of marginalized groups, etc.
I believe that it hasn't been a straight path. It's been filled with twists and
that's
turns.
how life is like.
Definitely. What would you describe, again, as your biggest challenge climbing this ladder?
Oh, well, I mean, I think as a woman, I have always had a very supportive family and friends. I've made choices. There are choices that we all make, some of which, in retrospect, we may not have made. Sometimes it's difficult balancing, family and career, and you need support, you need understanding, and sometimes you did not always get it. I remember, in my career at the institute, I had a particular director, and he had written an assessment of me, and I went in to speak to him, and I thought he could have started by trying to talk to me to find out what was happening, and I let him know that I did not appreciate it, but it didn't stop me from going ahead to do what I wanted to do. And like I said, I always had very supportive family and friends and colleagues. It can be lonely. I think we've come a long way. I think when people see that there are women vice chancellors in universities, they think that, now women in universities or in academia do not have problems. That's not true. For the 3 or 4 women who have been vice chancellors, there could have been another 10 or 15. And many women. I used to study the women in the university, look at their career trajectories, remembered very brilliant women in Wesley Girls, for example, who I then came to meet at the university. but whose career trajectory seems slow to me. And there are lots of balancing acts. And when you read the literature on female academics the world over, they suffer what is called the reproductive tax, looking after children, balancing relationships and different kinds of expectations. There's a lot of sexism, a lot of stereotyping, even hostility. The same people you meet in the society are also present in the universities, both as students and as academics, and some of it can be subtle, some of it can be crude. So it takes time for a lot of people to find their balance, but I think that over time there have been more support networks that have been created, and issues are brought out. Before, people bore their pain. There was really very few networks where they could discuss some of these issues, but now increasingly there are support networks, and but it's not. I was in another university outside of Accra. In fact, 2 different universities this year, and you can see that there are quite a few issues that the female academics go through there, and it does take time to assert oneself. But I think there are more, as I said, there are more supportive networks, So it can be lonely. I think but yesterday the World Health Organization said what loneliness was like a major health issue, and it can be lonely, and for some people it can also be lonely even in their homes, and you do need a lot of discipline, you need support to be able to balance country.
Sure. We really appreciate your contributions, Professor Takyiwaa Manuh, and you've already indicated that you've enjoyed so much support from the family, friends. I'm sure the children are also very proud of your achievements.
I should hope so.
How many of them?
I have 2 children.
Okay, girls or?
I have a son and a daughter.
A daughter.
Yeah, my daughter is a lawyer. She's a partner at a law firm in New York.
Okay.
My son lives here. He's an environmental engineer.
Great. We're all so proud of you, and we want to say thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you, Aisha.
Making Ghana a better place. But you also look very fit for your age.
What am I supposed to look like? But
you look very healthy, I must say, and fit.
Well, I do take care of myself, but yeah, I guess I am lucky. I'm healthy. I try to do healthy things, and
do you do some exercise?
I walk quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I walk a bit. I'm quite conscious of what I eat, and
it's working.
I've never been a big person, so
yeah.
But yes, I guess I'm lucky and I'm thankful, and I have people who help me to stay healthy. Yes,
Great. So after a hard day's work, I mean, like you said, you do a lot of research, you're chairing boards, you're going for meetings, you're doing all of this. You're supposed to be on retirement, but you're doing all of that. What do you do to relax?
I read, but these days I don't even, it's when I'm traveling, then I pick my books with me and I read. I'm a feminist, and people think when you're a feminist, it means that you don't cook, you don't do this. I enjoy cooking, and I am a wonderful cook, if I must say so. I don't cook every day, and I like to cook. I like, so you were asking me what I like doing. So tomorrow evening, for instance, I have people coming for dinner. I like inviting people over and making sure that, I select very much what I eat. The other day I was at the market, and some yesterday, 2 days ago, and there were these young people keeping on Indomie. I said, what's that? I've never eaten that in my life. That is not food for me.
Yes.
You know, every afternoon when I'm home, like this afternoon before you came, I ate my apim and contomere.
Wow.
I eat very healthily,
Yeah.
etc. So I enjoy entertaining a lot. I like conversation. I like talking. I'm interested in politics without being a politician.
Okay.
I'm a very political person,
Okay.
but not in terms of partisan politics,
Okay.
but politics in terms of choices and options and all of those things. I'm very interested. I'm a active follower of African and global politics and
Okay.
what is happening around the world. I take a
Okay.
very active interest. So
Amen.
I like discussing, debating,
Okay.
having a good time. I like dancing.
You do?
Yes, and
Okay.
I like my wine, and I now. So when you have time, you come. I will introduce you to
Definitely.
some. So if you want to come to the 7th floor with me, you stay with me, and I will guide you. You may need to change your shoes though, because we can't walk in those shoes.
I'll do the food actually one of the days.
Oh,
I'll come for dinner.
you're very welcome. You can tell me anything. Yeah. The other day we had some really nice kokonte and rere. You know
My
rere, neri.
goodness, yes.
And I made it myself.
That one, you can't eat it outside.
Yeah.
It should be homemade.
Yes.
But
Let me
when
know.
it's homemade,
Yes, let me
I
know.
enjoy it.
And I have dawa in my freezer.
Oh,
I have
wow.
it. Even when I lived in America, I had it in my freezer.
True
So
African.
when you want some real home cooking,
I would
you should let me know. But you have to stay on my good side.
Yes,
then
I have
can
to.
invite you.
Prof, so definitely you like dancing, so definitely you enjoy music. What genre do you like to dance to?
Depends on the mood. I like listening to jazz. I like listening to high life, R&B, different
Okay.
kind. It's a mood. It's mood.
Okay.
Yeah.
So-
Today
so-
is Friday evening,
Okay.
so you know.
What's the mood today?
Get down on some red wine and